It began, as most of my obsessions do, with a map. Not a ghost story whispered around a campfire, or a blurry photo on some forgotten corner of the internet, but a simple, frustrating blank space. A cartographer's mistake. That's what they called it. The town of Havenwood, nestled deep in the unincorporated woodlands of the upper Midwest, had been on every state and county map until the summer of 1984. And then it wasn't. It wasn't burned down, flooded, or evacuated. It just stopped. One day, it was a pinprick of civilization with a recorded population of 312 souls. The next, it was gone from all official records, the access roads reclassified as defunct logging trails, an entire town wiped clean from the page. For most, it was a bureaucratic footnote. For me, it was a siren song. I'm Leo, and I'm the one who gathers the threads. 5 Bacco YLCH. My crew, the 4 of us crammed into my groaning Ford E-Series van we'd nicknamed The Beast, each heard that song in a different key. Behind me, Caleb adjusted the small camera suction cup to the passenger window, its little red light a constant, blinking eye. For Caleb, Havenwood wasn't a mystery, it was content. He saw a 1 million subscriber YouTube special, a viral documentary titled, "They Erased a Town, What Are They Hiding?" He was all kinetic energy and fast-talking ambition, his world viewed through a lens, always searching for the perfect shot to capture the narrative he was already writing in his head. "Leo, my man," he'd said when I pitched it, his eyes gleaming, "this is it. This is the one that puts us on the map, literally." The irony wasn't lost on him. Beside him, Ilara was the quiet heart of our expedition. Where Caleb saw views, Ilara saw a historical impossibility. She was a doctoral candidate in American history, a woman who felt more at home in dusty archives than anywhere else. For her, Havenwood was a puzzle that defied logic. She was surrounded by a fortress of rolled-up survey maps and brittle, yellowed documents she'd unearthed from state records. "Towns don't just vanish, Leo," she had stated, her voice soft but firm, pushing a faded property ledger across my desk. "The paper trail stops cold. No land transfers, no foreclosures, no death certificates after July 1984. It's like a pen just lifted from the page mid-sentence." She was our anchor to the facts, the one who would keep us from floating away on a sea of speculation. And then there was Silas, sitting in the back, practically vibrating, with an excitement that was both infectious and slightly concerning. Silas wasn't an academic or a content creator. Silas was a believer. He'd been the one who first tipped me off to the legend in a late-night forum dedicated to American folklore and strange disappearances. He'd spent years collecting anecdotal evidence, hikers who took a wrong turn and spoke of a valley where compasses spun wildly, truckers who swore they saw flickering lights deep in the woods where none should be. To him, Havenwood was real, a modern brigadoon waiting to be rediscovered. His earnest, wide-eyed wonder was the fuel for this whole venture. Without his passion, my obsession would have likely remained just a collection of weird maps on my wall. As for me, I'm the leader, I suppose. The planner. I saw a story that needed an ending. I saw the perfect, final mystery in a world that felt like it had been fully explored. The challenge of it called to a part of me I thought had gone dormant. The familiar skyline of Chicago was a jagged line of steel and glass in the beast's rearview mirror. We'd been driving for 6 hours, the landscape slowly melting from concrete jungle to sprawling suburbs, then to the endless hypnotic farmland of the Midwest. The conversation flowed easily, a mix of Caleb's running commentary for his future vlog, Silas's enthusiastic theories, and Ilara's quiet, insightful questions. It felt good. It felt right. Our final stop was a place called Last Chance Gas and Goods, a lonely outpost on the edge of the real world. The name was a little on the nose, but it was accurate. Beyond this point, the paved road gave way to a network of gravel and dirt that hadn't seen maintenance in decades. The air here already felt different, thinner, cleaner, scented with pine and damp earth. Inside, under the greasy fluorescent hum, we stocked up. extra gas cans, jugs of water, beef jerky, batteries, all the essentials for cutting ourselves off. The cashier, a man whose face was a roadmap of wrinkles, watched us pile our goods onto the counter. He took a long drag from a hand-rolled cigarette as he rang us up. "Headed up the old North Fork Trail?" he asked, his voice a gravelly rumble. "Something like that," I said, keeping it vague. He grunted, his eyes lingering on our gear. "Ain't much out that way but trees and trouble. Road's been closed for 40 years. "We're well equipped," Alara said politely. The man just shrugged, his expression unreadable. "Your money." As we loaded the final supplies into the van, the sun was beginning to dip below the horizon, painting the sky in fiery strokes of orange and purple. I took one last look back at the gas station, its neon sign flickering like a dying heartbeat. It was the last piece of civilization we'd see for days. I climbed into the driver's seat and turned the key. The beast roared to life. "Everybody ready?" I asked, looking at my crew. Caleb gave me a thumbs up through his camera. Alara nodded, a flicker of nervous excitement in her eyes. Silas just grinned. A kid on Christmas morning. I put the van in gear and turned off the highway, onto a barely there dirt road already being reclaimed by the wild. The GPS on the dash went blank, the cheerful female voice replaced by a single damning word. Unknown. The world we knew was in the rearview mirror. Ahead of us lay only the encroaching twilight and a forgotten path. Havenwood was waiting. The moment the tires of the beast left the asphalt and bit into the dirt, the world changed. It wasn't sudden, like flicking a switch, but a slow, creeping transformation. The air grew heavy, thick with the scent of pine needles and decaying leaves. The trees, mostly birch and oak at first, began to crowd the road, their branches reaching for each other over our heads, lacing together to form a dense, green canopy that swallowed the sunlight. We were driving into a tunnel, and the light at the end wasn't a destination, but the world we were leaving behind. For the first hour, the mood in the van was still buoyant. Caleb was in his element, narrating our descent into the wild. "And as you can see, folks, we've officially left the grid," he said, panning his camera from the useless GPS screen to the wall of green outside. "Cell service is gone. Radio is pure static. This is where the real adventure begins." He was right about the technology. One by one, our lifelines to the 21st century blinked out. Our phones, which had been desperately searching for a signal, finally gave up, displaying nothing but a flat, final no service. It felt more significant than the GPS failing. It was a digital severing, an electronic silence that felt louder than any static. Phil. The road, if you could still call it that, worsened with every mile. The dirt track devolved into a pair of deep, muddy ruts carved through the forest floor. The beast groaned and shuddered as I navigated around fallen logs and over rocks that scraped ominously against the undercarriage. My knuckles were white on the steering wheel, my focus narrowed to the treacherous path just ahead. "How's the compass holding up, Alara?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. I heard a frustrated sigh from behind me. "It's wrong," she said. I glanced in the rearview mirror. She was holding her old, reliable orienteering compass flat in her palm, staring at it with a deep frown. "The needle isn't pointing north. It's not pointing anywhere consistently. It's just drifting, lazily spinning almost." Silas leaned over her shoulder, his eyes wide. "That's what the old story said, a magnetic anomaly. We're close, Leo. I can feel it." His excitement did little to soothe the knot tightening in my gut. A compass that doesn't work isn't folklore. It's a fundamental law of physics taking a vacation. And we were in its travel destination. The sense of adventure was curdling, replaced by a profound and unnerving isolation. We were 4 people in a metal box, pushing deeper into a place that didn't seem to follow the rules. After another hour of punishing, lurching travel, I saw it. A hulking shadow just off the road, half swallowed by overgrown bushes. I slowed the beast to a crawl, peering through the windshield. It was a car. An old Ford Pinto, Its once bright orange paint, now a mottled patchwork of rust and faded color. I pulled over and killed the engine. The sudden silence was absolute, broken only by the ticking of our cooling engine. "What is it?" Caleb asked, already unbuckling. "Company," I said, my voice low. We all climbed out. The air was cool and still. About 50 feet from the Pinto was another vehicle, a boxy Chevy Citation, its tires flat and its windows filmed with grime. They weren't crashed. They were parked, angled slightly off the path, as if the drivers had pulled over for a break and simply never returned. The doors were unlocked. No keys, no bones, no sign of a struggle, just empty shells. "They're from the right time period," Ilara murmured, running a hand over the rusted hood of the Pinto. "Early 80s, both of them." Caleb filmed everything, his hushed narration full of grim speculation. But it was Silas who noticed the other thing. "Leo," he whispered, his voice trembling slightly. He wasn't looking at the cars anymore. He was staring at the massive, ancient-looking oak tree that loomed over the clearing. "Look." I followed his gaze. Carved into the thick, gnarled bark was a symbol. It was unlike anything I'd ever seen. Not a rune, not a letter, not a pagan sigil. It was a complex, geometric shape, like a circuit board diagram designed by an insect, all sharp angles and interlocking lines. It was deep and weathered, clearly carved a long, long time ago. "Eh," Ilara gasped. She had seen it too. We began to look around, our eyes scanning the perimeter. They were everywhere. Every single large tree encircling this small, grim clearing bore an identical carving. A ring of silent, wooden sentinels, each branded with the same alien design. They weren't random, they were deliberate. A warning, or worse, a cage. Cold dread, sharp and real, washed over me. This wasn't a historical mystery anymore. The faded maps and bureaucratic errors back in Chicago felt a million miles away. This was something else entirely. The forgotten road, the dead technology, the abandoned cars, and now these symbols that hummed with a quiet, ancient menace. We had followed the allure of the forgotten right into its jaws. Standing in that silent, circled clearing, I had the undeniable feeling that we had just crossed a threshold, a line that had been drawn in the woods for a reason. And the symbols on the trees weren't just a warning to keep people out. They felt like a seal, meant to keep something in. The trees finally broke. After hours of navigating that claustrophobic green tunnel, the woods suddenly receded, opening into a wide valley just as the sun began its final, glorious descent. And there it was. Nestled in the basin below us, bisected by a placid, dark river, was Havenwood. My foot eased off the accelerator, letting the beast coast to a stop. For a long moment, none of us spoke. We just stared through the windshield, mesmerized. It wasn't a ruin. It wasn't a collection of collapsed log cabins. It was a town, whole and perfect, bathed in the soft, golden light of the dying day. A weathered, hand-carved sign stood at the entrance to the main road, its cheerful blue paint flaking but still legible. It read, "Welcome to Havenwood. A better place to be." "The money shot," Caleb breathed, his camera already pressed to his face. "Leo, this is unbelievable." Silas was a statue in the back seat, his face pressed against the glass. "It's real," he whispered, a note of pure, unadulterated awe in his voice. "It's exactly like they said." Ilara, our steadfast historian, was the one who seemed most shaken. She was pale, her hands gripping the stack of maps in her lap. "It shouldn't look like this," she said quietly. 40 years of neglect, there should be decay, overgrowth, collapsed roofs. She was right. As I let the van roll slowly down the paved main street, the wrongness of it all began to set in. We passed neat houses with tidy, if slightly overgrown, lawns. A child's tricycle lay on its side in a driveway, a fine layer of grime covering its red paint but otherwise perfectly intact. We drove past a quintessential American Main Street, a cinema with a blank marquee, a hardware store, a diner with a chrome and red facade. It was a movie set of a forgotten America. I pulled over in front of a wood-paneled station wagon parked by the curb. The silence was the most unsettling part. No birdsong, no distant traffic, not even the whisper of wind. The air was unnaturally still. "I'm going to take a look," I said, my voice sounding loud in the quiet. The car door of the station wagon opened with a soft, well-oiled click. Not the groan of rusted hinges I expected. The interior smelled faintly of vinyl and old air freshener. And there, dangling from the ignition, was a set of keys on a rabbit's foot keychain. My fingers brushed against them. They were cool to the touch. It was as if the driver had just stepped out to run an errand and would be back any second. A glance down the street revealed more of the same. Cars in driveways and along the curb, each one a silent metal tomb waiting for a driver who never returned. "Leo, you need to see this," Alara called from the doorway of a shop labeled Miller's Mercantile. We joined her inside. It was a grocery store, and it was perfectly, impossibly stocked. Cans of soup and beans were aligned on the shelves, their labels faded, but facing forward. Boxes of cereal stood in neat rows. There was no thick blanket of dust, no sign of vermin, no hint of the 4 decades that had supposedly passed. It was clean. Eerily clean. "This is impossible," Alara whispered, running a finger over a can of peaches. "It came away clean. The laws of entropy don't just take a vacation. Dust settles. Things decay. This isn't preservation, Leo. This is a pause. The entire town is on pause." The sun had finally dipped below the tree line, and the valley was plunged into a deep twilight. The street was growing dark. And then it happened. A low, electric hum buzzed to life, and a street lamp a few yards away flickered on, casting a lonely cone of pale yellow light onto the pavement. We all froze, staring at it. "Did you see that?" Caleb stammered, lowering his camera. The power is on." My eyes scanned the street, and that's when I saw it. Across the road, above the imposing stone facade of the Havenwood First National Bank, a set of red digital numbers glowed against the gloom. It was one of those old-school time and temperature displays. But the temperature was blank. Only the date remained, burning with an unwavering crimson light. It hadn't changed. It hadn't moved on. We walked closer, drawn by an invisible string, until we were standing directly underneath it, the 3 of them and me, bathed in its ominous glow. The numbers and letters were stark and undeniable, a final, chilling punctuation mark on the impossibility of this place. July 14th, 1984, we had found it. We had reached the fabled town that vanished from the maps, but standing there, under a single impossible light and a date frozen in time, the triumphant feeling of discovery had vanished, replaced by a cold, creeping terror. We hadn't found a lost town. We had found a tomb where time itself had died. And now, the night was here. The frozen date on the bank sign seemed to radiate a palpable cold. Night had fallen completely, but Havenwood wasn't dark. The sporadic street lamps cast long, distorted shadows, turning the idyllic Main Street into a landscape of stark light and deep, ominous black. The thought of sleeping within the town itself, in one of these silent, waiting houses, felt like trespassing in a mausoleum. "We camp on the outskirts," I announced, my voice sounding more certain than I felt. "Back by the van. We'll build a fire, establish a base. We don't sleep in here." No one argued. The unspoken agreement was thick in the air. Havenwood was for observing, not for occupying. But the lure of the mystery was too strong to simply wait for morning. "We have maybe an hour of this light," I said, pointing to the nearest street lamp. "We should split up, cover more ground. Alara, you're with me. We'll check the residential block behind the Mercantile. Caleb, you and Silas take the public buildings. the school, the cinema. But you stay on this street, where we can see you. Walkies on, Channel 1, 1 hour, then we regroup at the van. Agreed. Caleb nodded, his vlogger persona replaced by a grim focus. Silas looked like he was about to step into the holiest of temples. Agreed, they said in near unison. Alara and I chose a 2-story colonial with a white picket fence, the kind of house that belonged on a postcard. The front door was unlocked. Inside, the air was stale and still. The scene in the dining room stopped me cold. The table was set for 4, complete with plates of what looked like desiccated meatloaf and dried-up mashed potatoes. A thin film of gray dust coated everything like a funeral shroud. It was a life interrupted. They were in the middle of dinner, Alara whispered, her historian's detachment completely gone, replaced by a soft horror. We moved deeper into the house, into the living room. It was here we found the family's story, told in a gallery of framed photos on the mantel. The early ones were bright and cheerful. A smiling couple, a young boy and girl at the beach, a Christmas morning with piles of presents. But as we looked at the more recent photos, a disturbing pattern emerged. A birthday party in the backyard, where the father wasn't looking at the camera, but glancing nervously over his shoulder at the dark line of trees behind the house. A family portrait on the porch, their smiles tight and forced, their eyes wide with a shared, unspoken anxiety. The forest was in the background of every outdoor shot, a silent, menacing observer. Then I found the note. It was on a notepad by a rotary phone, the last page filled with frantic, looping scrawl. The ink was faded, but the message was clear. It wasn't a letter. It was a plea or a prayer. It's the trees. It's not the dark you should be afraid of. It's the trees. Leo, Alara said, her voice strained. She was holding a calendar from the kitchen wall. It was flipped to July 1984. The first 13 days were marked with normal appointments. Dentist, 10 a.m. Billy's game. But on July 14th, the box was filled with a single, shaky, heavily underlined word. Tonight. The days after were blank. A crackle from the walkie-talkie on my belt made us both jump. It was Caleb, his voice a hushed, urgent hiss. Leo, you and Alara need to get to the school, right now. What is it? Did you find something? I asked, already moving toward the door. Just get here, he replied. And the line went dead. The school was at the far end of the street, a large brick building that loomed in the darkness. We found Caleb and Silas in the principal's office. The room was a mess. Papers swept from the desk, a chair overturned. Silas was standing by the window, staring out at the playground, which was now a field of black shadows. Caleb was holding a leather-bound logbook, his knuckles white. "The principal's log," Caleb said, handing it to me. "Read the last few entries." I flipped to the final pages. The handwriting, once neat and professional, devolved into a panicked scrawl, just like the note in the house. July 10th. The children won't play near the woods anymore. They say the trees watch them. Attendance is down again. July 12th. Heard that noise again last night. From the woods, like metal scraping on stone, louder this time. It circles the town. God, it's getting closer. July 13th. We have to be quiet. They're drawn to the sound, to the lights. We're turning everything off tonight. Maybe they'll pass us by. My blood ran cold. I looked from the logbook to the humming street lamp outside. They are drawn to the lights, I read aloud. There's more, Silas said, finally turning from the window. He was holding a large, curled photograph. Found this under the desk. He unrolled it on the principal's desk. It was a class photo, dated June 1984. Dozens of kids and their teachers, smiling and squinting in the summer sun on the school's front lawn. The dark woods formed the backdrop. "Look," Silas said, his finger trembling as he pointed to the edge of the frame, right where the manicured lawn met the chaotic tree line. At first I didn't see it. It was almost perfectly camouflaged in the deep shadows between two large pine trees. But then my eyes adjusted. It wasn't a tree trunk or a trick of the light. It was a figure. It was impossibly tall and painfully thin, its limbs elongated at angles that felt fundamentally wrong, unnatural. It had no discernible features, just a stark, slender silhouette standing with a predatory stillness. It was watching them. The entire time, it had been watching them. The four of us stood there, crowded around the desk in the silent school, staring at the proof. The whispers from the past had found their voice. It wasn't a sickness or a disaster that had emptied Havenwood. It was a hunt. And the monsters were real. We half walked, half ran back to the van, the photograph of that impossibly thin figure burned into our minds. Every rustle of leaves, every snap of a twig under our boots sent a jolt of adrenaline through me. The cheerful welcome sign we'd passed hours ago now felt like a cruel joke. The town wasn't a better place to be. It was a baited trap. We set up our camp in a small clearing about 100 yards from the entrance to Havenwood, just within the tree line. The beast sat like a slumbering metal guardian, and in the center of our small circle of tents, I built a roaring fire. It felt like a primal necessity, a desperate attempt to push back the oppressive, encroaching darkness. The flames crackled and spat, a defiant sound in the profound and unsettling silence that had fallen over the valley. Ilara was the one who put a name to it. "There are no crickets," she said, her voice barely a whisper. She was huddled in a camp chair, a blanket wrapped tightly around her shoulders, staring into the fire as if it held all the answers. "No owls, no rustling of small animals. It's like the entire forest is holding its breath." She was right. The silence was a physical presence. It was the sound of a world with its volume turned all the way down, and it was infinitely more terrifying than any scream. Caleb sat cleaning the lens of his camera with a cloth, a repetitive, nervous motion. The cocksure vlogger had vanished, replaced by a pale, quiet man who kept glancing into the blackness beyond our firelight. Silas was the most worrying. He was withdrawn, staring at the flames with a haunted look in his eyes. He had been the believer, the one who dreamed of this place. Now that the dream had revealed its nightmarish teeth, he seemed to be receding into himself. "We'll take watches," I said, breaking the spell. 2 hours each. I'll take first. Everyone else, get some sleep. We need to be rested. We leave at first light. The decision was made. There would be no more exploring. The only goal now was survival and escape. Caleb and Ilara retreated to their tents without a word. Silas mumbled a quiet, "good night," and followed. I was left alone with the fire, my shotgun resting across my lap. For the first hour, I did nothing but listen to that suffocating silence, my eyes scanning the impenetrable wall of black that surrounded our tiny island of light. The town of Havenwood was a dark shape below, punctuated by those few, lonely street lamps that burned for no one. It was near the end of my watch when a cold unease settled over me. It was a paternal instinct, the leader's paranoia. I stood up and moved quietly to check the tents. Ilara's first, then Caleb's. I could see the shape of their sleeping bags, hear their soft breathing. Then I moved to Silas's tent. I unzipped the flap and peered inside. The tent was empty. His sleeping bag was still rolled up tightly against the far wall. "Silas," I whispered, my voice sharp with alarm. Panic, cold and sharp, pierced through my exhaustion. He hadn't just gone for a walk. He'd never even gone to bed. "Nah." I immediately went to Caleb's tent. "Caleb, wake up," I hissed, shaking his shoulder. "Silas is gone." He was awake in an instant, his eyes wide with fear in the dim firelight. We woke Ilara next. "Stay here," I told her. pressing the shotgun into her hands. "Keep the fire high. If you hear anything, get in the van and lay on the horn. Caleb and I are going to check the town." We moved with a desperate stealth, 2 shadows flitting down the main street. The glowing date on the bank sign served as a grim beacon. The town was even more sinister now, the vacant houses like hollow-eyed skulls watching us pass. And then we saw him. Whoa. He was standing in the exact middle of the street, directly under the light of the bank sign. He was perfectly still, his head tilted back, staring up at the frozen, glowing red numbers of July 14th, 1984. "Silas!" I called out, my voice echoing unnervingly in the dead quiet. He didn't move. He didn't even blink. As we got closer, I could see his face. His eyes were open but unfocused, glazed over like he was in a deep trance. His mouth was slightly agape, as if he were listening to something only he could hear. "Silas, man, snap out of it," Caleb said, waving a hand in front of his face. Nothing. I grabbed his shoulders and shook him hard. "Silas!" His head lolled, and then his eyes blinked rapidly. He looked from me to Caleb, then around at the empty street, his face a mask of utter confusion. "Leo, what? How did I get here? I was just in my tent." Before I could answer, the sound started. It came from the woods, from the darkness that ringed the valley. It was a low, grating, metallic scraping. It was the sound of something immense and heavy being dragged across stone, a sound that vibrated up through the soles of our shoes. It wasn't the sound of an animal. It was industrial, mechanical, yet sickeningly alive. Emenachta. It wasn't coming from one direction. It was coming from everywhere at once. It was circling us. The scraping grew louder, closer, the horrifying sound of the forest's true inhabitants waking up and coming for their town. We were 3 men, trapped in a single pool of light, and the monsters from the photograph were just beyond the shadows, drawing the circle tight. We didn't talk. We just ran. We fled the town and the bone-jarring, metallic scraping crashing through the undergrowth, back to the fragile safety of our campfire. The sound faded as we ran, not as if we were outrunning it, but as if it had simply decided to stop. The silence that rushed back in to fill the void was heavier, more expectant than before. No one suggested sleeping. We huddled around the fire, a small tribe of 4 again, the flames pushing back the shadows but not the fear. Silas was shaking, wrapped in 2 blankets, his eyes vacant. He couldn't remember walking into town, couldn't remember a thing between zipping up his tent and me shaking him back to awareness under the bank's crimson glow. He was a piece of the puzzle we couldn't place. Exhaustion is a tide you can't fight forever. Eventually, despite the terror, my eyelids grew heavy. The fire blurred. My last conscious thought was of the shotgun in my lap, its cold weight a useless comfort. I woke with a gasp to a world of gray. The fire was a pile of pale, smoking embers. The morning sky was a uniform, overcast sheet, and a damp chill had settled deep in my bones. I sat up, my body aching, and a terrible, immediate wrongness hit me. The camp was too quiet. The breathing I should have heard from the other tents wasn't there. "Caleb," I called, my voice a croak. I scrambled over to his tent and ripped back the flap. Empty. His camera bag, his gear, all there. But he was gone. A wave of nausea and pure, cold dread washed over me. Alara, Silas. I didn't need to check. I knew. Their tents were just as empty. But unlike Caleb's, their sleeping bags were gone too. It wasn't just them, it was their gear. Methodical. Deliberate. My shout brought Caleb stumbling out from behind the van, his face ashen. "They're gone, Leo," he stammered, his hand shaking as he pointed toward the woods. "Their footprints." I saw them. Together, we found the tracks. 2 sets of them, clear in the damp soil at the edge of the clearing. Alara's smaller boot prints and Silas's larger ones, side by side. They weren't running. The stride was even, measured. A calm walk into the forest. Awed bide. We followed them. pushing through wet branches that slapped at our faces. The tracks led away from the town, away from the road, deeper into the suffocating green. My heart pounded a frantic rhythm against my ribs. What were they doing? Why would they walk into the one place we knew the monsters were? After 50 yards, the impossible happened. The footprints just stopped. It wasn't a scuffle. It wasn't a drag mark. There was no sign of a struggle. 1 second, there was a clear, deep impression of Alara's boot in the mud. And then, nothing. The patch of earth where the next step should have fallen was covered in undisturbed, damp leaves. The same was true for Silas's prints beside hers. They ended in perfect unison, as if the two of them had been plucked straight up into the sky. Caleb just stared, his mouth hanging open. That's not possible. But it was. We were in a place where the laws of physics came to die. I backed away slowly, my mind reeling. This wasn't an abduction. This was an erasure. Nokia. We had to get out. But first, one last, desperate search. Maybe they'd left something. A message. A sign. We walked back into Havenwood, and the town felt different. The station wagon I'd inspected was no longer parked at the curb. It was now sitting neatly in a driveway 2 houses down. The child's tricycle, which had been on its side, was now upright, its handlebars pointing toward the street. The door to Miller's Mercantile, which we had left ajar, was now firmly shut. The town was tidying up after us. It was a living, breathing thing, subtly resetting itself, smoothing over the wrinkles of our intrusion. It was Caleb's idea to check the diner, the Havenwood hub. The door swung open onto another scene, frozen in time. Coffee mugs sat on the counter next to little puddles of dried black liquid. Menus were tucked behind chrome dispensers. The air was thick with the phantom smell of old coffee and fried bacon, and on one of the red vinyl booths, I saw it. A single white paper napkin, held down by a glass sugar shaker. Alara's handwriting. It was rushed, jagged, a stark contrast to her usually neat, academic script. My hands trembled as I picked it up. It wasn't a plea for help, it was a warning. Don't fight the reset. It doesn't want to be remembered. The road out is a lie. My blood ran cold. The road out is a lie? What did that mean? But it was the final sentence, scrawled at the very bottom of the napkin, that shattered what little composure I had left. It has my voice now, Leo. Don't listen. Alara's note felt like a physical weight in my pocket. The road out is a lie. The words echoed in my head, a nonsensical, terrifying loop. But what was the alternative? Staying? Waiting to be plucked from the earth like our friends? Waiting for the town to tidy us away? No. The road was our only option, lie or not. We're leaving, I said to Caleb, my voice a harsh command. Now. He didn't need convincing. He just nodded, his face a pale, grim mask. We packed what was left of our camp into the beast, with a frantic, desperate energy, tossing tents and gear into the back without a care. I didn't look back at Havenwood. I didn't want to see its empty windows or the glowing red date on the bank sign. I just wanted it in my rearview mirror. I slammed the van into gear and stomped on the accelerator, sending a spray of mud and gravel into the air. We peeled out of that accursed valley, back onto the dirt path that had brought us in. But something was wrong. Terribly wrong. The air. The road wasn't the same. The treacherous, rutted mess that had taken us hours to navigate was now smooth. The fallen logs were gone. The rocks that had scraped the belly of the van had vanished. It was a well-maintained, almost pristine gravel road, cutting a clean, easy path through the woods. It was as if the forest itself had decided to usher us out. The drive, which had been a grueling, lurching battle on the way in, was now effortless. Leo, this is too easy, Caleb said, his voice a nervous whisper. He was staring out the passenger window, his knuckles white, where he gripped the dashboard. The road out is a lie. The ease of it was more terrifying than any obstacle. This wasn't a path of escape. It felt like a conveyor belt, a guided tour out of a nightmare that didn't want us to linger. The dread was a coiling serpent in my gut. I pushed the accelerator harder, and then we saw them. At first it was just a flicker of movement in my periphery, a flash of something dark against the green. I slowed down, my eyes scanning the trees lining the road. There, standing between two thick pines about 100 yards away, was one of them. The figure from the photograph. It was just as Silas had described, impossibly tall, unnaturally thin, a stark black silhouette that seemed to absorb the light around it. It stood perfectly still, its long, stick-like limbs blending with the tree trunks. It wasn't moving, it was just watching us pass. "Did you see that?" Caleb breathed, his voice cracking. I didn't have to answer. A few seconds later, we saw another one on the other side of the road. And then another. They weren't chasing us, they were stalking us. A silent, terrifying honor guard seeing us to the edge of their domain. They were letting us go. And the realization was not a relief, but a curse. They weren't afraid of us. We were beneath their notice, two mice being released from a trap only because the experiment was over. The moment we hit the blessed, solid asphalt of the main highway, it felt like breaking the surface of the water after being held under for too long. I gasped for air I hadn't realized I was holding. The figures were gone. The woods were just woods again. We drove for 10 miles in absolute silence before I saw the familiar flickering sign of the last chance gas and goods. We pulled in, the beast's engine ticking in the sudden quiet. The same wrinkled cashier was behind the counter, reading a newspaper. He looked up as we entered, his expression flat. "Back already?" he grunted. "Didn't find much trouble, I guess." "We need to use your phone," I said, my voice urgent. "It's an emergency. Our friends are missing." He shrugged and pushed an old rotary phone across the counter. I dialed 911. My hands shaking so badly it took 2 tries. When the dispatcher answered, I poured out the story. The town, the disappearance, the road. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. "Sir," the dispatcher said slowly, her voice tinged with confusion. "There's no town by that name in this county, or in this state. The old North Fork Trail has been impassable for decades. It's a dead end." "No, you don't understand," I insisted, my voice rising. "We were just there. Havenwood. We have proof." Caleb was already pulling out his camera. "The footage," he said, his face alight with a desperate hope. "It's all here. The sign, the cars, the bank." He powered it on. The screen flickered to life, showing the last video he'd taken. A shot of the camp moments before we fled. He scrolled back. The video of Silas in his trance? A corrupted file, refusing to play. The footage from inside the school? Glitching, unwatchable static. The photo of the figure in the trees? A blurry, overexposed shot of a lawn. Every single piece of digital evidence from inside Havenwood was gone, replaced by garbled data and static. Pre. My phone. I pulled it out. The pictures I'd taken of the note, the abandoned cars, gone. My digital map with the pinned location, blank. It was all being erased. The world was rewriting itself around us, smoothing over the impossible existence of Havenwood, sealing the crack in reality we had slipped through. No one had heard of Ilara or Silas. The cashier didn't remember 4 of us stopping for gas, only 2. We were left standing in the greasy light of the gas station, our proof dissolving into digital ether, our story becoming a madman's rant. Havenwood didn't just want to be forgotten, it was actively forgetting us. And we were the only 2 people left in the world who remembered it was ever there. The drive back to Chicago was a silent gray blur. The familiar skyline rose to meet us, a forest of steel and glass, but it felt alien. We had returned to a world that hummed with life and noise and light, but Caleb and I were ghosts haunting it. We were disconnected, adrift in a sea of 7 million people, burdened by a truth no one else could see. Mevea. My apartment became our sanctuary and our prison. The maps of Havenwood were still pinned to my wall, the only tangible proof we had left. They felt like relics from another reality. For days we barely spoke. We just existed in the shared suffocating space of our trauma, jumping at shadows, scrutinizing the dark spaces between buildings from my apartment window. It was Caleb who broke the silence. He hadn't given up. For a week straight, he'd been hunched over his laptop, running recovery software, trying to salvage anything from his corrupted memory cards. Mostly he found nothing but digital noise. But sometimes, in the wreckage, an echo survived. "Leo, come here," he said one evening, his voice low and intense. He didn't look up from the screen. I walked over. He was playing a corrupted video file, one of the last ones he'd taken as we fled the campsite. It was mostly static, a blizzard of black and white pixels. "It's junk," I said, turning away. "No, wait, don't look at what's there," he said. "Look at what isn't." He froze the frame. In the chaotic noise there was a shape, a void. An area where the static seemed to flow around something, like water around a rock. He expertly inverted the colors on the screen. The static turned black, and the void bloomed into a stark white silhouette. It was one of them. The impossibly tall, painfully thin figure. It hadn't been in the woods. It had been standing right at the edge of our campsite, partially obscured by the van, watching us sleep. It had been there the whole time. My blood ran cold. The creature wasn't just in the footage, it was the corruption. Its very presence had destroyed the data around it. That discovery unlocked something. We started combing through the rest of the files not for what we could see, but for what was missing. We found them everywhere. A long, slender arm in the reflection of the beast's side mirror. A tall, watching silhouette at the end of Main Street that we had mistaken for a telephone pole. They had been all around us, hidden in plain sight, their forms so alien our brains simply refused to register them until now. Hello. The audio was even worse. We took the few salvaged audio clips, mostly crackling static, and ran them through noise-filtering software. In the background hiss of the recording from inside the principal's office, we found a faint, rhythmic sound. Scrape, drag, scrape. It was the sound from the woods, so low we hadn't consciously heard it then, but the microphone had. But the final discovery was the one that broke us. It was from a short audio clip Caleb had accidentally recorded on a lapel mic just before we'd fled the camp. It was only 10 seconds of wind and crackling embers. He isolated a faint sound in the background and amplified it, looping it over and over. A voice emerged from the static. It was Alara's voice, clear as day. But it wasn't her. The tone was flat, devoid of emotion, a horrifyingly perfect mimicry. And it was whispering a single, chilling phrase. "I'm Falah. The road is open. The road is easy." Cussed as clear as day. My heart seized in my chest. "It has my voice now, Leo. Don't listen." She had tried to warn me. The thing that took her, the entity from the woods, it had used her voice, her memory, to whisper the lie that had led us away. It had cleared the path for us. It had shown us the way out because it wanted us out. La yalapath khupsa. We were contaminated, we knew. And it didn't want its secret getting out. It had let us go, confident that the world would reject our story, that our proof would disintegrate. It had won. We sit here now, in the heart of Chicago, two men with an impossible secret. All our proof is gone. The maps are just old paper. The corrupted files are just electronic junk. Our story is just the rambling of traumatized minds. We have nothing but the haunting certainty of what we saw and what we lost. But the most terrifying realization came last night. I was staring out my window at the city lights when I saw it. A flicker of movement in the alleyway across the street. It was a place of deep shadow, Between two dumpsters, I saw a shape detach itself from the darkness. It was tall. It was thin. It was there for only a second, before melting back into the black. They hadn't just let us go. They had followed us. The entities from Havenwood don't just notice those who become aware of them. They keep watch. Our proof may be gone, but we are not. We are the last living evidence. And we know, with a bone-deep certainty that feels like a death sentence, that someday the road will call to us again. And we will have to go back.